Welcome to Conspiracy Deconstructed.
Today, we are opening up a file that really defined a generation's deepest fears. Fears about, social media, digital life, and youth mental health. We're talking about the Blue Whale Challenge.
Yeah, and we've really gone deep into the sources on this one. We've been looking at academic papers on digital self-harm, social contagion, that kind of thing.
And also media analyses, thousands of news reports, fact-checking sites, public safety guidance from international bodies.
Right. And the picture that emerges, it's a lot more complex, maybe even more disturbing than that original horror story we all heard.
The claims themselves, they were genuinely terrifying, especially if you were a parent at the time.
Oh, absolutely.
Authorities, media outlets, they all latched onto this idea, this narrative of a coordinated digital suicide cult actively recruiting vulnerable teens.
Sourcing them into this deadly 50-day countdown. It sounded like something out of a movie.
It really did.
So our mission today, it's pretty straightforward, but it feels critical. We need to cut through the panic, the headlines, all the viral stuff.
And ask that tough question.
Exactly. Was there really a global digital suicide game with this sinister curator figure pulling the string?
What was the Blue Whale Challenge? Something else entirely. Something maybe more insidious in a different way. Like a weaponized rimmer.
A classic moral panic, maybe, but just, turbocharged by social media, spreading fear, maybe diverting attention from the real underlying problems with mental health.
That's what we're going to explore. We're going to trace this whole story back to its single dramatic root.
And look at the actual verifiable evidence. What proof is there that this game existed?
Versus the, frankly, overwhelming evidence that suggests it was really a profound and quite harmful case of media-driven contagion. A moral panic for the digital age.
Okay, let's start with the theory itself. The raw version, the really compelling one that just exploded across social media and news channels everywhere back around, 2017?
Yeah, that's about right. The Blue Whale Challenge, as it was defined, was this secretive social network game.
Supposedly starting in Russia around 2013, they said.
That was the origin story. And then it supposedly spread like wildfire. Dozens of countries, targeting teens on platforms like VKontakte, which is huge in Russia, but also others.
And the structure of it, that was key, wasn't it? It wasn't just random acts.
No, that's what made the narrative so chillingly effective. It was reportedly very precise, a series of 50 escalating tasks.
Assigned over 50 days.
Over 50 days, yeah. Assigned to the players by an online administrator, this curator figure.
Right, the curator.
And the relationship was described as almost cult-like.
Yeah.
Built on control, obedience, escalating demands.
And the tasks themselves. They weren't just about self-harm initially, were they? It was more insidious.
Exactly. According to the theory, they were designed to break down psychological defenses, isolate the participant from their usual support systems, friends, family.
So what kind of early tasks are we talking about?
Our sources describe things that sound relatively minor, but maybe draining, designed for compliance, like watching specific, often grotesque horror movies. Things designed to be psychologically disturbing.
Right, unsettling stuff.
Or drinking lots of coffee, staying up all night for days, trying to induce exhaustion, maybe paranoia.
And there was the symbol too, right? The whale.
Yes. Often an early task involved carving or drawing a specific blue whale symbol onto their skin, like branding, a mark of obedience.
That's grim. So the whole point of these early stages.
According to the theory, it was about getting compliance. Wearing down resistance, making the player more susceptible to later command.
And then it escalated.
Oh, it escalated quickly and maliciously, moving rapidly into severe, visible self-harm.
Like what? What did the reports claim?
The challenge supposedly demanded tasks like cutting or burning cryptic phrases or symbols into the skin. Deeper cuts than the initial whale symbol.
Okay.
Standing on the edge of a tall building or a bridge. Testing nerve, pushing boundaries. Even things like ingesting non-lethal poisonous liquids, just to test compliance. Or deliberately inflicting pain, may be severe enough to fracture bones.
And they had to prove it.
That was a key element of the control mechanism. The participant often had to take videos or pictures of themselves completing these tasks.
Photographic evidence sent to the curator.
Exactly. To ensure control, compliance. It made the threat feel so immediate, so verifiable to anyone hearing the story. You could imagine the photos.
Yeah. And the final tasks, leading up to day 50.
Well, the 49th task was often described as something like going to a high place, a rooftop, a bridge, and just sitting there, hanging your legs over the edge.
Like a psychological prep.
That's how it was framed, preparing for the final act.
Which brings us to day 50. Task 50, the final one.
The theory claimed this final challenge was blunt: commit suicide.
And the reports often sensationalized this part too, didn't they?
Hugely. Claiming participants were expected to jump from a high-rise building often, sometimes with instructions to film it or leave a specific note or message behind.
Maximizing the social media exposure, making it public.
The whole thing was framed not just as a private tragedy, but as this, public performance of self-destruction, all supposedly curated by this external controlling force.
It's just a terrifying narrative. And the name Blue Whale, you mentioned its origin is complex.
Yeah, it adds to the mystique, doesn't it? It's a bit uncertain. Some reports linked it to a song by a Russian rock band, Lumen, about a huge blue whale that can't break through the net. So this feeling of being trapped, caught.
That fits the narrative.
It does. But the more common and frankly more disturbing explanation you heard was the reference to blue whales beaching themselves.
Voluntarily, like they choose to die.
That's the perception, yeah. Seemingly deliberate self-destruction. It serves as this really grim metaphor for the players supposedly sacrificing themselves at the end of the game.
Okay, so we have this structured, horrifying narrative. Digital coercion, isolation, escalating harm. It's a story practically engineered to trigger fear, especially fear about losing control of kids online.
Absolutely. It minimized the victim's agency completely.
But stories like this, even really potent ones, they need a spark, right? To jump from some dark corner of the internet to global headline news. Where did this specific story get the oxygen it needed? How did it go global and trigger such intense moral panic?
We can actually trace the ignition point pretty precisely. It goes back to May 2016, and specifically to an article published in a well-known Russian newspaper, Novaya Gazeta.
Novaya Gazeta.
For anyone studying media panics or social contagion, this single piece of journalism, it's basically ground zero. It's the detonator for the whole global phenomenon.
Wow. So what was the claim? What made that article so explosive, so instantly viral?
It alleged that this blue whale phenomenon, and they specifically linked it to an online group called F57 on VKontakte Day.
The Russian social network.
Right. It claimed this group was responsible for an astronomically high number of recent child deaths in Russia.
How high?
The article specifically tied 130 suicides, 130 seemingly unrelated child suicides that had happened over about 6 months, from November 2015 to April 2016, directly to membership in this F57 group.
130 deaths linked to one online group. That's massive.
I'd say staggering now.
Yeah, I can immediately see why that would trigger just a huge visceral wave of panic. First across Russia, obviously, and then internationally as it got translated and shared. It paints a picture of this out-of-control, organized epidemic.
Exactly right. And the story landed on incredibly fertile ground. That pre-existing context is really important to understand why the panic took hold so fast and so deep.
What was that context?
Well, tragically, child and adolescent suicide was already a very real, very serious, and highly sensitive problem in Russia, and also in neighboring countries like Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan. The rates were often among the highest globally.
So there was already this underlying tragedy happening.
The grim reality, yes. According to official Russian government figures, 720 minors died by suicide in 2016 alone. 720.
That's heartbreaking. What were the known causes?
They were primarily attributed to very real systemic issues. Things like chronic mental health problems, serious family dysfunction, high rates of parental alcoholism, drug abuse, intense bullying, and just a severe lack of opportunity, especially in certain regions.
So a society already grappling with this terrible, complex problem.
Exactly. And then suddenly the media provides this simple external villain, this curator figure, someone easy to blame for an incomprehensible tragedy.
It's easier than looking at the systemic issues, I guess.
It's a cognitive shortcut. Precisely. It offers this clean, external explanation instead of forcing society to confront its own internal systemic failings.
Okay, but back to that Novaya Gazeta article. The claim was 130 deaths linked to the game. What did the actual data show?
This is the absolutely crucial data point. The piece that really undermines the article's central claim right from the start. Authoritative Russian reports, the official figures for 2016. They indicated that only 0.6%, 0.6% of all minor suicides in Russia that year had any known connection to the internet or social media activity whatsoever.
0.6%, not 130 deaths driven by an online game.
Not even close. The original article drew this massive sensational causal link where official investigations found none. It basically took a tragic correlation, yes, 130 kids sadly died during that period, and slapped a fictional causation onto it. This manipulative online game, F57.
Wow.
And this sensationalism, despite being criticized pretty quickly by investigators for lacking forensic evidence, it just took off. The damage was done. The moral panic was already sweeping the globe, moving way faster than any factual correction could hope to catch up.
Right, so the foundation was shaky from the start. But despite those immediate factual holes, this story just achieved incredible global staying power, didn't it? It jumped borders, moved into India, Brazil, the US, the UK.
All over the world.
And for parents, for authorities dealing with these awful tragedies, the threat felt incredibly real, visceral. So let's look at why. What were the main pieces of evidence that proponents of the theory and the media outlets fueling the fear kept pointing to? Let's try to lay out their case charitably.
Okay, yeah, that's fair. There were definitely recurring themes, pieces of proof that kept circulating.
So, evidence piece one. You need a villain, right? You need a mastermind. And they found one, or seemed to. Proponents pointed squarely at the arrest of this guy, Philip Budeikin.
Budeikin, yeah. He was positioned as the alleged administrator, the creator of that original F-57 group mentioned in the Novaya Gazeta article.
And his arrest was massive news, wasn't it? Because it put a face to the horror.
Absolutely. It seemed to confirm that there was a central controller, a real person orchestrating this. Reports started coming out that Budeikin, often described as psychologically troubled background, all that had pleaded guilty in St. Petersburg.
Guilty to what, specifically?
The charge reported was inciting at least 16 teenage girls to kill themselves. That number, 16, is already way down from the initial 130, but still.
Still terrifying. And the media coverage around him, it wasn't subtle?
Not at all. It was designed to be chilling. They published quotes attributed to him, like referring to his victims as biological waste, claiming he was just cleansing society of people he saw as worthless or disposable.
It's the perfect monster narrative. Calculated, sociopathic. It gives a human face to the evil, makes it understandable in a horrible way.
Exactly. It created this clear picture of someone actively curating a death cult. For many people watching the news, Budeikin's arrest and these reported quotes were definitive proof. The game was real, the curator system was real, end of story.
Okay, so that's piece one, the supposed mastermind's arrest. What about evidence piece two? This seems crucial too. The visuals and the case studies of kids seemingly doing these tasks. Even if the original game wasn't real, the idea started to manifest physically, right?
Yes, and this is where we can't just dismiss the entire panic as pure fantasy, because the concept, once it went viral, absolutely led to real-world imitation and self-harming behavior that mirrored the reported tasks.
And academic sources confirm this?
They do. For instance, there's a 2019 Italian study that documented 5 suspected blue whale challenge cases that ended up in a pediatric unit specializing in child abuse. Now, these weren't necessarily verified players of some original structured game run by Budeikin.
But their actions were inspired by the narrative.
Directly inspired by it, yes. The way they were harming themselves, the symbols they were using, it all lined up with the BWC stories circulating online and in the news.
And these cases included actual visual evidence, pictures of the harm.
Yes. That study and others mentioned visual depictions, photos taken by the kids themselves or observed by doctors showing self-harm that directly matched the descriptions of the blue whale tasks. Carved messages, specific symbols like the whale, distinct types of injuries.
Can we talk about one specific example? I think there was one mentioned in a case report, Miss A.
Right, Miss A. A 15-year-old Hispanic girl. She had a documented history of depression and previous self-injurious behavior, which is important context that she was already vulnerable.
And crucially,
she was actively following challenge participants, or people claiming to be participants, on social media. She was absorbing the narrative, the visuals, the language.
And then she started doing it herself.
She engaged in specific self-harm techniques that had become strongly associated with the challenge online, like the salt and ice burn, which creates a specific type of injury. And she recorded a video of herself doing it.
Why? Did she say why?
When asked, her explanation was heartbreaking. She said it wasn't about seeking fame, but she wanted, quote, for other people to know her pain.
How?
So it shows the power of the narrative, right? The actions described in the Blue Whale Challenge were physically manifesting in vulnerable young people. That undeniable, visible harm absolutely lent credence to the idea that this was a pervasive, dangerous threat. The actions became real, even if the centralized game structure behind them wasn't.
Okay, that makes sense. It feels real if you see the results. Now, evidence piece 3. Coercion and blackmail. This was a huge part of the fear factor, the idea you couldn't just stop.
Yes, this was a key element that really fueled the terror. News articles widely reported this idea. If you started the challenge, if you tried to back out or failed to complete a task,
The curator would threaten you.
Exactly. Threats of blackmail, leaking sensitive personal information the player might have shared, like photos or secrets, or even death threats against the participant or their families. That was the claim.
And that narrative, it completely removes the victim's agency, doesn't it?
Entirely. It turns them into pure victims of this calculated evil force. It's the ultimate hook for a conspiracy story or panic.
Yeah.
They aren't willing, they're trapped. They're coerced.
It explains away why a seemingly normal kid would continue doing these increasingly dangerous things. Because they were scared, held captive by the curator's threats.
That was the logic presented, yes.
But let's be forensic for a second. Did investigators, looking at actual cases, ever verify even one instance where that specific type of blackmail, do task 50 or I'll hurt your family, actually occurred and directly led to a suicide?
And that's the crucial disconnect.
Yeah.
While the story of blackmail was pervasive in the media narrative and incredibly powerful in generating fear,
The proof wasn't there.
verifiable evidence of a centralized curator systematically carrying out those kinds of threats to force a specific suicide remained elusive, according to the fact checkers and investigative reports we looked at. But the fear that it could happen, that this was the mechanism, that was enough to keep the panic alive.
Okay. And finally, evidence piece 4. The official reaction. The sheer scale of the response from governments, police, schools, that must have massively legitimized the threat for the average person.
Oh, absolutely. This is huge in any moral panic.
Yeah.
When official institutions, people in uniform, governments treat something as a clear and present danger, the public understandably believes it is real.
And the warnings were everywhere, weren't they?
All over the globe. Police forces issued warnings in the US, Australia, the UK, Bulgaria, many others. Schools sent letters home to parents.
I remember the Indian government took really strong action.
They did. They formally wrote to Google, Facebook, Twitter, WhatsApp, demanding that all links related to the Blue Whale Challenge be taken down immediately. They were trying to regulate the concept itself.
Wow, banning an idea.
Pretty much. And countries like Pakistan, Egypt, Kenya reportedly issued outright bans or very strong warnings against even mentioning the game concept.
So when you see government spending time and resources, issuing directives, demanding action from tech giants,
It solidifies public belief that this must be a genuine, spreading epidemic. Regardless of the lack of concrete, verifiable proof behind the scenes connecting it directly to deaths. This institutional validation, the official stamp of fear, was arguably the most convincing piece of evidence for the average concerned parent or citizen. It felt undeniably real because the authorities were treating it as real. Okay, now we get to the heart of this conspiracy deconstructed deep dive. We've laid out the narrative, the pieces of evidence that made the Blue Whale Challenge feel so terrifyingly real to so many people.
right, the arrested administrator, the visuals of self-harm, the blackmail threats, the official warning.
Exactly. Now it's time to calmly, factually dismantle that narrative point by point, using the data from the investigations, the fact checks, the academic studies we've gathered.
Okay, let's unpack it. Where do we start?
Let's start right at the foundation. A, tracing the original flaw. The media's ignition. The entire global panic, pretty much everything that followed, rests squarely on that initial May 2016 Novaya Gazeta article.
The one claiming 130 deaths linked to the F-57 group.
That's the one. And as we touched on, investigators and media analysts criticized it almost immediately for drawing that causal link where none had been proven. We really need to underscore how fundamental that initial flaw was.
So fact-checking organizations looked into this.
Oh, yeah. Major fact-checking sites like Snopes dug into it deeply. Comprehensive investigations by organizations like Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty did too, and they all reached the same conclusion. No conclusive evidence whatsoever was found linking those specific 130 suicides directly to the structured 50-day challenge, or to a coordinating group like F-57 actively pushing kids towards it.
So that huge number, the number that literally sparked the global firestorm, it was built on sand, just correlation dressed up as causation.
Absolutely. A tragic correlation. 130 children did die by suicide in that time frame, but the article simply overlaid the F-57 group membership onto those tragedies, creating a sensational narrative that was instantly viral but lacked any real forensic backing.
And you mentioned Pranesh Prakash from the Center for Internet and Society. What did he find regarding actual digital evidence?
He confirmed that in basically no case investigated under the Blue Whale banner Did forensic analysis of the kid's phone or laptop reveal conclusive communications, showing someone urging them to engage in specific tasks, step by step, leading to the end? The digital breadcrumbs just weren't there.
The UK Safer Internet Center even called it what? Fake news?
They labeled it a sensationalized fake news story, yes. Very blunt. But okay, that still doesn't explain Budakin, right?
Yeah.
The guy they arrested. That felt like concrete proof to many.
Right. Let's tackle B, deconstructing the administrator narrative. Budakin. Philip Budakin. He was held up as the smoking gun, the face of the evil. But when you look closely at the data surrounding his case, as researchers like Georgi Apostolov from Bulgaria's Safer Internet Center did, it becomes incredibly messy and inconsistent.
How so?
Well, those initial claims were 150, maybe 130 victims linked to him or the group. That number then shrank dramatically in official reports, sometimes citing 17, and the number he was actually convicted for inciting was reported as 16.
16 is still horrible, but it's a world away from 130 or 150. A world away. And here is the really decisive fact, the one that everyone listening should probably take away. The worldwide number of verified deaths that can be directly and conclusively linked to the actions of an original Blue Whale curator running the specific 50-task game. That number remains exactly 0.
0, globally, despite all the headlines.
0 confirmed, causally linked deaths traced back to the original structured game as described.
Okay, wait. If the evidence connecting him directly to orchestrating suicides was so thin, why did his arrest get treated like undeniable proof by global media and even some authorities? Why did it blow up like that?
It seems to boil down to intense public and media pressure. After that Novaya Gazeta report ignited the panic, there was immense pressure on Russian authorities to do something, to find someone responsible for the very real tragedy of teen suicides.
And Budakin was involved with these online groups.
He clearly had been communicating with vulnerable individuals online in these darker communities. He was involved. So his high-profile arrest served as a very public demonstration that the government was taking action against this perceived threat, whether or not he was the Bond villain the media portrayed him as. It satisfied the need for an arrest.
And his own statements. You mentioned earlier they were sort of contradictory.
We were. While the media loved those shocking biological waste quotes, which frankly sound designed for maximum impact, there were other quotes attributed to him that are much more telling. Like him reportedly saying he merely communicated with them and they ended their lives without his direct influence.
That sounds very different from managing a step-by-step suicide cult.
Very different. It suggests his actual crime might have been more about engaging in destructive psychological manipulation within these existing online groups of vulnerable teens, rather than actively managing a structured, coercive 50-day game with forced tasks leading inevitably to suicide.
Right. And then the hoax itself, the idea of the Blue Whale Challenge, started being used by actual criminals.
Exactly. This is where the concept shifts from just a moral panic into a tool for actual crime. The idea of the threatening curator became real because copycat criminals saw an opportunity to exploit the widespread fear.
Like the Russian mail carrier.
Yeah, Ilya Sidorov, arrested in 2017. He wasn't running a suicide game. He was arrested for extortion. He was pretending to be a Blue Whale curator, sending threats to a teenage girl, demanding money to not leak her information or harm her family.
So he was using the panic for financial gain.
Precisely. His crime confirms that the hoax itself was being exploited because the original panic was so pervasive. It doesn't confirm that the original sinister suicide game was real. It confirms the fear was real and exploitable.
Okay, that makes sense. So let's talk about C, the true nature of the online groups. The media narrative was that these groups, like F57, caused suicide, but the reality was more complex.
Much more complex. And this is where the media fundamentally misread the situation, largely by confusing correlation with causation again. Yes, it's true. Many teens who tragically died by suicide were members of these online communities on VKontakte. They used whale imagery, they talked about self-harm and death.
But the groups didn't necessarily make them suicidal.
Researchers quickly proposed the idea of reverse causation. Meaning the vulnerability likely came first. The troubled teens, already struggling with suicidal thoughts, depression, intense isolation, maybe bullying, they actively sought out these dark online communities.
Why? What were they looking for?
They were looking for a place where they felt understood, where they could share their experiences, often anonymously, and receive validation from peers who were going through similar struggles. It wasn't necessarily about being recruited into a game.
So these weren't recruitment centers run by evil curators. They were more like dark corners where suffering kids gathered.
In many cases, yes. They became spaces for shared coping mechanisms, albeit often very unhealthy and dangerous ones. Peer support mixed with despair.
That's a very different picture.
It is. And the origin of these blue whale or Sea of Whales groups seems rooted in something specific too. After a Russian teenager named Rina Polankova died by suicide, reportedly posting a photo shortly before her death, her story went viral within these communities.
And other groups used her story?
Some administrators used her name and image, almost like clickbait, to drive traffic to their own groups. But research also uncovered cases like one administrator who claimed he created a whales group not to push suicide, but paradoxically, to try and help suicidal teens by becoming one of them, gaining their trust from the inside.
Wow. That's incredibly complex and dark.
It's messy. It's rooted in existing mental health crises, the complexities of online subcultures, and tragic individual stories. It's not the simple, clean narrative of a coercive game master controlling pawns.
Which brings us squarely to D, the media's role and the harm of misinformation. This feels like the crux of it now. The focus shifts from, is the game real, to how did the media's handling of the story make the threat feel real and potentially cause harm?
This is probably the most definitive finding from the research we looked at, especially the studies analyzing news coverage. One major study analyzed 150 digital news reports specifically about the Blue Whale Challenge, checking them against established, evidence-based, safe messaging guidelines for suicide prevention.
Guidelines designed to prevent copycat effects and further harm.
Exactly, and the findings were, well, they weren't just disappointing, they were genuinely shocking. Overall, a staggering 81% more than 4 out of 5 articles violated at least one critical contagion-related guideline.
81%. So the vast majority of media outlets trying to warn the public about this supposed danger were actually reporting on it in a way known to be dangerous itself.
Yeah.
How does that happen?
It seems they prioritize the sensational, viral story over established public safety protocols. Let's break down the 4 most common ways they violated these guidelines, because understanding how the misinformation spread and caused harm is vital.
Okay. What was the first major violation?
First, normalizing suicide. About a third of the articles, 33%, did this. They presented suicide, especially among youth linked to this challenge, as if it were a common, almost expected event.
How? By using those big numbers?
Partly, yeah. Constantly citing those large, unconfirmed figures like 100-plus Russian deaths, even long after they've been questioned or debunked. This frames suicide as a pervasive, almost normal response to stress or online influence. And prevention guidelines strongly warn against this because it can reduce the taboo and potentially lead to imitative behavior in vulnerable individuals.
Okay, and then just pure sensationalism.
Absolutely, that ties in. 31% of articles use clearly sensationalizing headlines, things designed purely to grab attention and stoke fear. We saw examples like, alert, parents of dead teen find clues to her suicide on bedroom wall. It's a deadly game, and it's spreading.
Wow. Zero subtlety there. The bias is clearly towards maximum emotional impact, not accuracy.
Precisely. The second major violation category is tied directly to the nature of the BWC story itself, discussing means of suicide.
Because the game was all about the specific tasks.
Exactly. The narrative is inherently defined by its supposed 50 tasks, many involving specific methods of self-harm or suicide attempts. So reporters felt compelled, or perhaps just drawn, to detail these methods.
Describing the cutting patterns, the symbols, the locations.
Yes, discussing the specific ways to cut, the tools used, the nature of burns, the idea of standing on ledges, jumping. By listing out these tasks, they were essentially publishing a potential playbook.
Giving ideas to vulnerable people.
Directly contributing to the risk of the imitative behavior we talked about earlier with those case studies. They were, in effect, distributing the instruction manual under the guise of warning the public. It's an incredible failure of responsible journalism.
Just unbelievable. Okay, what was the third failure?
The use of stigmatizing language. This was really common. 58% of the articles analyzed used the word commit when referring to suicide, committed suicide.
Why is that specific word a problem?
Because commit historically implies criminality or sin. You commit a crime, commit a sin. Using it in the context of suicide reinforces stigma, associates it with wrongdoing.
Which makes people less likely to seek help.
Exactly. It increases shame and can make someone struggling with suicidal thoughts feel judged or criminalized for their intense emotional pain, hindering help-seeking behavior. The recommended language is died by suicide or took their own life.
Okay, that makes sense. And the fourth major violation, this seems really fundamental, lack of credibility and causal language.
Yeah, this ties back to the original sin of the Novaya Gazeta article. The research found that a massive 81% of articles use causal or confirmatory language.
Saying things like,
referring to a teen as, say, the 5th victim of the notorious Blue Whale Challenge, stating it as fact, presenting the link as proven.
even when they didn't have proof.
While providing little, or sometimes absolutely no, actual evidence of that causal link within the article itself. They consistently prioritized repeating the viral narrative, Blue Whale claims another victim, over the verified facts, or lack thereof.
And you mentioned that incredible example earlier, the article that literally contradicted its own headline.
Yes, it's such a stark example. The headline screams something like, Class 10 student found hanging, family blames Blue Whale. Sensational, causal. But then, buried in the body of the same article, it admitted the police investigation had found no trace of the Blue Whale game on his phone or laptop.
But they ran with the headline anyway.
They amplify the sensational fear in the headline and basically bury the factual rebuttal deep in the text, assuming most people only read the headline or the first paragraph. It's journalistic malpractice.
So, what was the overall public health consequence of all this reckless reporting?
It led to a fundamental misdiagnosis of the actual problem, and therefore a serious misallocation of resources and attention.
How so?
Journalists, and subsequently the public and authorities, often speculated on unconfirmed reasons for why kids might participate, like game addiction, which was mentioned in almost a quarter of the articles. They focused on the shiny, scary object, the game,
instead of the underlying issues.
Instead of focusing on the actual documented mental health crises, depression, anxiety, bullying, trauma, lack of support. As Pranesh Prakash argued, this sensationalism meant authorities poured energy and resources into trying to ban a non-existent game,
while neglecting what was really needed.
instead of investing that same energy into improving mental health facilities, increasing access to therapy for young people, or properly educating communities about depression, spotting warning signs, and tackling bullying. They were fighting a media-manufactured ghost.
Because the media had convinced everyone the ghost was the primary threat, it effectively sidelined the real, tangible mental health support that could have actually saved lives.
And even when articles did try to include some health promotion advice, the adherence was incredibly shallow. The study found that while 91% included at least one guideline, like talk to your kids,
it was mostly vague stuff.
very vague, often emphasizing parental involvement in a general sense, but failing to provide specific actionable resources. Only 37% actually emphasized help-seeking behaviors in a meaningful way. And get this, only 3 articles in the entire data set of 150 provided a direct resource, like a national suicide prevention hotline number.
3 out of 150.
3. The focus was overwhelmingly, disproportionately on amplifying the danger, not on providing the antidote.
Wow. That systematic failure in journalism, prioritizing clicks over safety, it really brings us to the most fascinating and maybe the most important part of this whole story. Why did this specific hoax, built on such shaky foundations, become so incredibly sticky, so globally powerful? It crossed cultures, languages, continents. It has to be more than just bad reporting or clickbait, right? It must tap into something deeper.
Oh, absolutely. It's a textbook example, really, of a moral panic operating in the digital age. But it's like moral panic on steroids, accelerated and amplified by the very structure of modern technology and social media.
Sociologists have looked at this, like James P. Walsh.
Yes. Researchers like Walsh connect the Blue Whale Challenge directly to the classic moral panic theory.
Yeah.
For a moral panic to take hold, you generally need a few key ingredients to align.
What are those ingredients?
You typically need folk devils. These are the groups or types of people who become the target of fear and hostility. You need clearly defined victims. And you need an object of anxiety, something perceived as threatening the established moral order or the safety of society.
So in the Blue Whale case,
Well, the youth were kind of paradoxically positioned as both the folk devils engaging in this dangerous, secretive online behavior and the primary victims. And the internet itself, particularly social media platforms, became the ultimate object of anxiety, the thing that was supposedly corrupting youth and leading them to destruction.
and social media didn't just host the anxiety, it actively spread it, right? That architecture of amplification you mentioned earlier.
Precisely. Social media platforms created this perfect architecture of amplification. Information, especially alarming or emotionally charged information, spreads exponentially faster than ever before.
And the algorithms reward it.
The algorithms, by design, often prioritize engagement, clicks, shares, comments. And what drives engagement? Often it's content that evokes strong emotions, fear, outrage, moral indignation. So alarming, sensational, morally charged stories like the Blue Whale Challenge get algorithmically boosted. Fear literally travels faster and deeper online than calm, factual correction ever could, especially when the subject involves children and death, the ultimate emotional triggers.
Okay, so the tech amplifies it.
Yeah.
But let's go back to that core psychological drive. Why did adults, parents, teachers, even authorities seem so ready to buy into the narrative of the external curator villain? Why was that explanation more appealing than focusing on internal issues like mental health services?
I think for adults grappling with the truly terrifying complexity of adolescent mental health, self-harm, and suicide, the Blue Whale narrative offered a clear, identifiable external enemy.
Something concrete to blame.
Exactly. It's psychologically much easier, much less uncomfortable, to blame a shadowy, possibly foreign curator figure or an addictive evil game than it is to confront the deep-seated systemic issues within our own societies.
Issues like
Chronic depression rates, the impact of bullying, online and off, the social isolation exacerbated by technology, economic hardship affecting families, and maybe most critically, the often woefully inadequate or inaccessible mental health resources available to young people.
So blaming the game provides a false sense of control?
A powerful, albeit false, sense of control. Yes. If the threat is portrayed as a specific game run by specific bad actors, then the solution seems simple. Ban the game, block the websites, arrest the curator. Problem solved.
But if the threat is actually deep-seated mental illness driven by complex social and economic factors?
Then the solution is much harder. It's slower, more expensive, requires systemic change, introspection, and addressing uncomfortable truths about society. Blaming the blue whale allows us to avoid that difficult work.
It feels like we've seen this pattern before, haven't we? With other panics.
Definitely. You mentioned Dungeons & Dragons in the 80s, the panic that it was recruiting kids into satanic cults, leading to suicide or murder, same mechanism. Then there was the satanic ritual abuse daycare panic. Later, things like challenges associated with Momo.
The details change, the supposed threat changes.
But the underlying psychological pattern often remains the same. Find a sensationalized cultural artifact, often linked to youth culture or new technology, and externalize the blame for complex, frightening social problems onto it.
And you mentioned Nutama Brody's point earlier. The hoax becomes real through the reaction.
There's such a crucial insight from the sociological analysis. Brody argues that even if a viral story starts as fiction, as someone's imagination, it doesn't necessarily stay fictional. It can, quote, become real over time because we've invested so much interest in them.
How does that work?
The collective fear, the media frenzy, the governmental bans, the police warnings, the school letters. That massive global reaction solidified the blue whale concept in the public consciousness. It made the idea of the challenge real and potent.
And once the idea is out there and feels real,
it becomes available as a script, a narrative framework that vulnerable young people might latch onto, imitate, or use to express their own distress, even if the original organized game never existed. The reaction inadvertently created the very thing it feared, in a way.
Which leads directly to the danger of the social norms effect, right? Even if the game is fake, if kids think it's real and widespread.
That's the core risk. And it's well supported by research like Wesley Perkins's work on social norms theory. The real danger often lies not in the actual prevalence of a behavior, but in the misperception of the norm.
So if media reports keep hammering home stories of hundreds of victims and this spreading epidemic,
vulnerable young people might start to perceive participation in something like the Blue Whale Challenge, or at least the self-harming behaviors associated with it, as more common or even normalized among their peers than it actually is.
And that perception could influence their behavior.
It could lead to imitative self-harm. Or, as Georgi Apostolov suggested, they might adopt the challenge narrative as a framework, an excuse almost, to not talk about their real problems, their depression, their trauma. They end up performing the role that the media and the panic inadvertently created for them.
That's incredibly sobering. It means the most effective prevention strategy isn't necessarily content filtering or banning keywords.
Important as those might be in some contexts.
But it's really about critical digital literacy, media awareness.
It's arguably the single most important protective factor moving forward. Young people and adults, too, deserve the truth. They need to know. This specific story was largely false, fueled by sensationalism. The vast majority of their peers are not being manipulated by online death cults.
So countering the misinformation needs to be as viral as the panic itself.
Exactly. The more the truth goes viral, The truth that the BWC narrative was a harmful hoax that diverted attention from real issues, the better equipped young people are to see through it. They can align themselves with their peers' media literacy and critical thinking rather than a falsely perceived norm of risk-taking. We need to teach everyone how to recognize the classic red flags of a moral panic before it gains unstoppable momentum.
And this isn't just about Blue Whale, is it? We saw almost the identical pattern repeat just a couple of years later with the Momo Challenge hoax.
Precisely. Grotesque imagery, claims of hidden messages telling kids to self-harm or worse, widespread media amplification, parental panic, school warnings.
And the actual evidence.
Law enforcement agencies worldwide investigated and couldn't confirm a single case of anyone being harmed as a direct result of instructions from Momo. But the panic was real, the fear was real, and resources were diverted. The pattern amplification, sensationalism, misdiagnosis, externalizing blame, it's persistent because that underlying psychological need for a simple scapegoat remains powerful, especially when technology and youth tragedy intersect.
The lesson seems crystal clear then.
When a story hits that nexus, youth, tragedy, technology, death, our default tendency as a society, amplified by media incentives, is often towards panic. And in that panic, we risk disseminating harmful misinformation ourselves, ultimately diverting resources and attention away from the places they are most desperately needed, supporting mental health and building resilience. #outrage.
This has been, well, it's been an incredibly sobering analysis, hasn't it? Looking back at one of the defining viral fears of the last decade.
It really has.
So just to quickly summarize the key takeaways for everyone listening. The Blue Whale Challenge, as it was widely reported, was not a verified, sinister, global suicide cult. It was, by pretty much all credible accounts, a profoundly viral moral panic.
Yeah, a panic that seems to have originated from that single, highly sensationalized 2016 report in Russia, which falsely linked unrelated tragic youth suicides to a specific online group.
And that initial spark was then fanned into a global wildfire by media outlets all over the world. Outlets that, as the research showed, largely prioritized sensationalism, with that shocking 81% violating basic safe reporting guidelines over factual, evidence-based journalism.
And the concept, the idea of the challenge, it gained this feeling of legitimacy, not through any confirmed deaths directly caused by a central curator figure,
But through other things.
but through tragic instances of imitative behavior, through copycat criminals exploiting the fear, and crucially through that collective desire, especially among adults, for a simple external explanation for incredibly complex and painful issues around adolescent trauma, mental health crises, and suicide.
So the real antidote, the place we should have been focusing all along, it remains the same, doesn't it? Robust mental health support, accessible resources for struggling young people,
And critical digital literacy, teaching ourselves and our kids how to navigate the online world critically, how to recognize manufactured fear, how to resist the pull of algorithmic manipulation that thrives on panic.
Right. So here's the final thought we want to leave you with today, something to maybe mull over.
The Blue Whale Challenge hoax, for it to spread the way it did, it actually required hundreds of journalists, thousands, maybe millions, of concerned parents and citizens to actively participate in its creation and propagation, mostly by sharing the fear uncritically.
Yeah.
So now that we have a clearer understanding of how easily these moral panics can be engineered, or at least massively amplified in our current social media age, what other complex societal issues right now might we be choosing to externalize? What are we blaming on a convenient fictional game or curator, rather than doing the harder work of addressing the difficult internal roots within our own communities, families, and systems?
That's a really powerful question to reflect on. We encourage you to think about that. And maybe let us know what stands out most to you about how the media handled this story. What implications does it have for how we consume news and online information today? We genuinely love to hear your thoughts.
And finally, just a necessary reminder, one that, as we discussed, was so often tragically omitted in the very reporting that fueled this panic. If you or anyone you know is struggling with thoughts of self-harm or suicide, please reach out and contact a professional immediately.
There are resources available, like the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline or similar services in your country. They are staffed by trained professionals who are ready and want to help. Please don't hesitate to reach out for support.
It's vital.
Thank you for joining us on Conspiracy Deconstructed.